In this presentation, we're going to set up a bank rule related to an amount. In other words, we're going to have one rule for a particular vendor up to a certain point, up to a certain dollar amount, and then over that, we'll have some different rule for any amount over that cutoff limit. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Online. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars file. We're going to start off by opening up our P&L profit and loss by going to the reports on the bottom left-hand side, and then we will open up that profit and loss report. We're going to be changing the dates up top. The dates are going to be going from January, and let's go up from 05/01/20 to 06/30/20. And then we'll run that report. And then I'm going to right-click on the tab up top and duplicate that tab up top. Then I'm going to go back to the tab to the left. We're going to go back down to the banking. Let's open up the banking section. And now we're going to be considering our bank rules. So we might have a situation, and this often is the case if you're thinking about purchases that are over a certain dollar amount. You might say, hey, look, I'm going to set the same rule up to a certain dollar amount, and then when it gets over that point, I want to do something different. And this might be the case if you're a contractor or something, and you buy a lot of stuff possibly from Home Depot, or if you're any kind of office supply type of company and you get office supplies, and you buy something from office, Staples or Office Depot or something like that. If you buy anything under a certain dollar amount, you might say, hey, that's supplies. Just group that into supplies. I don't even want to, I don't need to break it out. It is what it is. It's going to be under that amount. If you buy anything over a certain amount, then you might say, hey, I'd like to look at that at least and check it out differently rather than putting it simply into supplies. And possibly it needs to be capitalized, go into some type of fixed asset like equipment. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to say, hey, if I have Home Depot and let's imagine we're like doing construction jobs. I'm kind of deviating from our guitar shop here, but we're doing construction job here, and we're buying normal kind of stuff. Then we'd say, well, that's just going to be the normal kind of supplies. But if it goes over a certain dollar amount, we might then say, okay, that's going to be something that I need to capitalize. Possibly that's going to be a piece of equipment, and we might have that rule. Any kind of other type of business that buys office supplies, like I say, might be the same type of thing. Every time we buy something from Staples or wherever we buy our normal office supplies, probably just supplies, just going to group it into supplies. But if I get over a certain dollar amount, I got to go up. I might need to capitalize that, and therefore I'll set a different rule over that cap and at least look at it in a different way and possibly put it into equipment or something like that. So in our case, we got these Home Depot. If we set up the rule there, let's do this a couple different ways this time. We've got these amounts that I would assume all being into office supplies. This amount over 1,500 then might be going to equipment that I would be purchasing there. So in order to do this, let's actually duplicate this tab up top. I'm going to right click on the tab up top and duplicate it. And that way I can have this tab open on the left that we can go back into the data, and then on the right we'll go into our rules. So let's go back up top. And let's set just kind of a basic rule first and see what happens. So I'm going to go into our rules. We have our two rules so far from last time. I'm going to close up the hamburger. I'm going to make a new rule. And then I'm going to say Home Depot is going to be the name of the rule. And I'm going to copy that. And I'm just going to make a simple rule first off. This is going to be for money going out rather than money going in. And the text, if it contains the text Home Depot, then I'm just simply going to say it's going to go to the transaction type is an expense, and the payee is going to be Home Depot, which I might have there already. I do. So that's our vendor in this case. And then the category, actually Home Depot wasn't there. So let's try that again. I think it was there. I could have sworn that I had Home Depot in there. So let's see if I can go down here and type in Home Depot. No, it's not in there. So let's add it as a vendor. So I'm going to add it as a vendor. And then the category, where's it going to go in the categorization? Office, I'm just going to say office supplies. So it's going to be expensed, in other words. That's going to be an expense account. And then if I go ahead and save that, that's just kind of the generic rule. And that's probably the rule that the system would have made if I just recorded that transaction. QuickBooks would have said, hey, I'm going to try to memorize that basically. So let's save that. And then I'm going to go back to the first tab. Going to refresh the first tab and see if it picks up then these Home Depot items with our rule. So there we have it. Now Home Depot is being applied out. And so that looks good. Notice how much more control we have when we do it ourselves on the rule, because now I can go back to the rule, and if I want to manipulate it, I can come back in here in the rules section and manipulate it, do something different with it. As opposed to if I let the system do it, I might have less, unless I create an actual rule of it that's going to show up in those rules I can manipulate, I might have less control over it. And then I'm going to go back in and I'm going to say, yeah, well, that's great, but this one, that one kind of shouldn't be there. When that happens, I would like it to tell me so that I can apply basically a different rule to it. I want to apply it to a fixed asset account because I can go in and review it a little bit more easily in the fixed asset. There'll be less transactions there. So I'd like it to break that out. So I'm going to go back over to the rules and say, this one's okay, but I'd like to edit this a bit. And then I'm going to say Home Depot over, let's say 750. I'm going to say 750. That's going to be the name of the rule. And then we have the bank text. It's going to contain Home Depot. So that's not, Home Depot is the one item in it. Then I'm going to add a line item and say that we have another rule that's going to be based on an amount. And the amount needs to be less than, I'm going to say 750. So two rules here. One, it's got to have Home Depot in it. And two, it's got to be less than 750. So then I'm going to go down and say that it's going to be an expense item. And we could have Home Depot. You may want to put another vendor. You could put a vendor in there that's, a vendor for everything that's under 750. But I'm going to just keep the same vendor. It's going to be going to office supplies. So that's going to be our rule. Let's apply this and see what happens. What do we expect to happen? We expect it to negate this one from being picked up now. That one should go away, you would think. Going back over, I'm going to go ahead and say save. Then I'm going to go back over to our first tab. Let's refresh the screen and see what happens. So now our rule is picking up these three items, but not this one because it's over the dollar amount. Okay, so then we could set up a rule. What if I want to pick that one up and put it into like equipment? So I want to say second rule, pick that one up, put it into equipment. So I could then say, let's go new rule. And this is going to be, once again, to Home Depot. And it's going to be for money going out. It's going to have the text of Home Depot in it. So we'll contain the text of Home Depot. However, we could make another line item and say that I also want a dollar amount. And then it's going to be, it has to be greater than, we're going to say the 750. So we want to be over the 750 this time. It's going to be an expense, and the payee is going to be Home Depot, and then the category now is going to be equipment. So now we're going to put it on the books as an asset. It's going to be a fixed asset type of account. It's going to be on the balance sheet. So we'll put it under equipment. Let's save that and see what happens. We would think that it should then apply out this rule to that one lagging item. Back to the first tab. Let's refresh that tab. And here it is, and it applied out that last rule. Notice it's going to machinery and equipment. So it applied it out correctly. That looks good. Now, the other thing you might consider, you might say, hey, well, that's kind of overkill. You don't really need, if I go back to the rules here, if this one's picking up everything that's under 750, I can then kind of have a catch-all rule that should apply to everything else that has Home Depot. So in other words, I only need to set one of these possibly, and then the other one's just going to catch everything else that's in Home Depot. So for example, if I went into this and I edited this second rule, and I said, this is Home Depot, and I don't even need this second amount, right? I could say, just remove that second amount, and then this one will pick up everything else, right? I have two rules. And so as long as I can tell the system somehow, apply the first rule first, and then this rule, then this should be the catch-all for everything that the other rule doesn't apply to. So let's take a look at that. For example, if I save this and then I say, hey, apply this rule first, and then that's going to be everything under the 750, then this rule, which means it's a broader rule. This is a broader rule, so it's going to be catching everything else. So this should still pick up the same kind of effect. If I go back over here and I refresh this screen up top, let's refresh this and see if it still keeps us where we want to be, the same position with that new rule setting. And we can see that it does down here, right? It still applies out just like we would the machinery and equipment being broken out. Now, just to show the order of operations, if you were to say, well, what if I put this one up top, right? And now you've got the Home Depot catch-all rule before the second rule. Well, that's not going to work, right? Because it's going to apply the catch-all rule before we have the more restricted rule. The broader rule needs to be on the bottom. And just to show that, let's see what happens if we do that. I'm going to go back over here and refresh this again. And then if we scroll back down, now they're all going to machinery and equipment, which is not what we want to have. These three we want to be going to supplies. So that just shows the order of operations. If I go back to the rules then, note that you can basically be more restrictive by your rules by either making multiple rules that are more restrictive, or you can use the order of operations. And when you use the order of operations, you want to be putting the more restrictive rule on top and then the catch-all rule underneath it. So in our case, did that change? It doesn't look like it changed. So now we have the more restrictive rule up top and the more like catch-all, the broader rule beneath it. It will apply the more restrictive rule first, and then the broader rule will catch everything else in the place. So I'm going to say apply that rule. That should take us back. I made a new rule. I'm going to go back and refresh the screen, and that should take us back to where we want to be. So if we go back to Home Depot, there we are. We got them all right where we want to be, the office supplies and then the machinery and equipment when it was over the 750. Now I can select all these here, or I can find them in the recognized area. I'm just going to select the first one, hold down Control, select the last one, and then I'm going to accept these items by going to the batch actions and accept the select. Accept the select, please. And then I'm going to go back to the P&L, profit and loss. Let's see what happens here. Let's refresh this screen. Close up the old hamburger over here. Hold down Control and scroll up a bit. Here we have it. We have the office supplies here. If I go into the office supplies, there's going to be the Home Depot amounts, everything under the 750. If I go back then, let's take a look at our balance sheet. I'm going to go to the prior tab, open up the old hamburger, go down to the reports down below, because we put the other side on the balance sheet because of it, we need to capitalize it because it was over 750, and therefore we got to capitalize it and depreciate it and all that good stuff. Opening up the balance sheet, we'll change the date range up top, changing the date range from the 05/01/20 to 06/30/20. Run that report, and then let's close up the old hamburger, hold down Control, scroll up to that 125, which is the place we like to be to see this stuff. And then we put this into machinery and equipment. So there it is, machinery and equipment. That's what we put the amounts that were over the 1,500. So you can see that'll break out. And now every time we go into the future and we buy something over 750, it'll apply out that rule. We could still approve the rule because it'll show up as green, and we can go and kind of double check that and say, is that, if it's 751, can I still put it into supplies and whatnot? So that'll be just kind of a general rule that we could still check in the bank feeds because we didn't automatically have them go straight into the books. But it should be something that's going to be more correct over time, and it gives us that dollar limitation so that we can basically break that information out. Notice that this is a very common type of thing that when you do audits or something like that, you want to look at. You gotta go in and look at like office supplies and things like that and see if there's any really large dollar amounts in there that really shouldn't be in the office supplies, possibly should be something that should be capitalized, and the bank rules can help you to automate that process and make it something that pulls it out as you do the data input and allows you to at least take a look at it and apply a general rule that's probably more proper.